Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's class. Can you hear me, guys? Good evening.
Yes, good evening, sir.
Okay, that is very
Yeah,
nice.
I can hear you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's class. Uh, as you can see on the screen, like I said in on Friday, our last class, that we'll be discussing on the course regression and estimation. Um, and then we'll be starting our first calculation today in relating to cost segregation. And let's see how we can fasten that so that we won't keep ourselves long enough today and we'll be able to achieve the main aim. Um, Tonight, at the end of the class, I expect everyone to be able to know how to use high and low method in separating a course. Last class, we talk about how course classification work, and then the different type of course classification, where we talk about the cost element, the function, nature, and then by behaviors. And then we also discuss about the differences, how variable cost, fixed cost, step cost, and then how they are work. And I want to believe that each and every one of us go through the materials to understand the concept much better. And we are able to test ourselves using the two exercise that was given to. It's only one person that submitted the assignment on the group, which I expect us to at least go through it and then submit it as we discussed in the last class. Well, not to take much time, today we want to talk about how cost segregation works. We have already talked in the last class about the concept of a semi-variable cost, where we said cost semi-variable cost can comprise of the fixed and then the variable cost. The purpose of cost segregation is how can we split those costs, the semi-variable cost, how can we split them into the variable and then into fixed cost as well, so that each of the costs can be aligned to what they are being used for. The techniques that we use in segregating them is what we know as cost segregation. And then there is a particular uh, formula that we usually use in splitting these two costs together. We have a particular formula that we can use to split the semi-variable cost into the fixed on its own and then into fixed cost on its own. And if, for example, we are given a total level of activities. I believe we also know what level of activities mean, like we discussed last class. If we are given a total level of activities, and then we are also given a total cost to produce that level of activities. They did not give us the actual amount that we can spend for the variable, and then that we are going to spend on the fixed cost. They only give us the total cost. It means in this total cost, it comprises of the variable cost and then the fixed cost as well. Now, how can we split them? That is when this cost segregation comes in. And then we have a formula. I believe you can see the screen where we have the formula to ascertain the total costs. Is equal to y is equal to a plus bx, where our y is the total cost in a period, and then the x is the number units of the output or the volume of activities in a period. YA stand for the fixed cost in the period, and then the B stand for the variable cost per unit. In the last class, we said fixed costs are the costs that are constant in total for a period of time, while the variable costs are constant per unit. But as the level of activities increases, the variable costs in total will also increase. Now, there are several methods that we can use for cost functions. This formula that we just discussed, we have different cost functions that we can use. We have different cost functions that we can use in separating the variable cost as well as the fixed cost. We number one is cost analysis. Number two, high and low analysis, and then linear regression analysis. And when I was checking in the afternoon to see how I can have been testing these from this method that we can use to determine the cost function, I realized that the major two that they have tested so far is the high and low method and then the linear regression analysis method, which means we are going to focus on the high and low method that will help us to determine our cost per variable cost and then the cost fixed costs as well. Then by next class, we'll be focusing on how to use linear regression to determine the cost function. Now, let's move to high and low method. Let's assume the major thing that we need to assume while working with high and low method as follows. The only thing causing any change in costs is the change in activities. For cost to change, it starts to affect our level of activities. We plan to produce 1,000 units of a particular product, and then due to the demand in the market, we decided to increase the level of the activities. As the level of the activities is increases, the cost involved too will be increases. That is why we are bringing in this to separate both the fixed and variable costs in a different approach when we are giving the total costs. The total cost involve fixed and variable costs. We need to know that particular attribute very well, very, very well. If we are giving total costs, we can also call it mixed costs. It involves both fixed and then variable cost elements. High and low method just give us the simplicity on how to split them into their level of how structures it has been, the fixed and the variable. Now you can see high and low method can be used for separating a semi-variable cost. And then we can also use them if there's a stepped change in fixed costs. We also discuss about step fixed costs, where there is a change in the fixed cost over a period of time, due to the level of activities. Maybe, for example, we are producing 10,000 and then want to increase it to maybe like 12,000. And then the fixed cost that we budgeted to put that 10,000, it now require us to add some amount to it. Then if there is a change in the level, the third one is when there is a change in the variable cost per unit. In this aspect, if there is a change in the variable cost per unit, maybe our level of activities is increasing, and then it gives us the opportunity to reduce our variable costs. The variable cost per unit in producing 10,000 products, the variable cost per unit is 3 naira. And then when the level of activities increases to like 15,000, we now have the opportunity to minimize the variable cost per unit, maybe to like 2.5 naira per unit. When there is a change in the variable costs, we can also utilize the high and low method. Now, the key things that we need to understand in high and low method when we are preparing the high and low method, they are basically 4 things. Number one, we need to know the high and the low level of our activities and the costs that are associated to them. The high level of activities is 500 units, and then the cost is 2,000. I'm just giving an example so that we can understand. The low level of activities is 300 units, while the associated cost is 1,005. We need to know if they give us more than 2 different level of activities with the associated costs. We need to know which one is the highest level of activities, which one is the lower level of activities, because that is what we are concerned about. We need to know the higher and the lower one. The first step that we need to know is to determine our high and low level of activities with their associated costs. And then the number 2 step is, after we have determined the high and low level of activities, then we need to calculate the variable cost per unit. How can we calculate the variable cost per unit? when we have already ascertained the high and we have already ascertained the high level of activities and lower level of activities. Now, what we are to do is to know the cost of the high level of activities. If the cost of the high level of activity is 2,000, and then the lower cost of the cost of lower level of activities is 1,005. Now, the differences between the cost of the high level and the cost of the lower level, the differences is what we are going to use to calculate the variable costs. And then the second one is our high level of activities and the lower level of activity. The differences, the example that I'm giving, the high level is 500, the lower level is 300. 500 minus 300 is going to give us 200, the level of activities. The cost associated to the high level of activities is 2,000, while the cost associated to lower level of activities is 1,500. Now, 2,000 minus 1,500, the differences in cost is 500, while the differences in the level of activities is 200. Then what we need to do to get the variable cost per unit is to divide those differences among the cost and the level of activities. Now we said the level of the cost of the level of activity and the low is 500. Then we need to divide it by the differences. It means if we divide it, it's going to give us 2 naira 5 kobo. We are still going to work on it, with examples so that we can understand how each of these steps work. And then the third step is we need to calculate the fixed costs associated with this total level of activities by substituting them either the high level or the lower level of the activity. You can see the formula. We say fixed cost is equal to total costs at level of activities. It can be either of the lower total cost or higher total costs. Either way, we can use it. We are still going to arrive at the same amount. When we are doing practical aspects, we understand them better. I decided to put the formula like I explained above, that A, which is the fixed cost, is equal to Y. Y is our total cost minus B. B is the variable cost per unit. YX is the level of activities. For us to get the fixed cost now, is going to be A is equal to Y minus B multiplied by X. Now, the last one, the last steps is use the total fixed cost and the variable cost per unit from the step 2 and the step 3 to calculate the estimated costs at different level of activities. Now, the purpose of this things now is to create the cost functions. We have to create the cost function so that as the time goes on, we will be able to be ascertaining our total cost when producing any level of activities, because we are able to set the fixed cost for a period of time, and then it helps us to know the variable cost per unit. Then we'll now be capitalizing on this variable cost per unit regardless of the level of activities we want to prepare. If our level of activities is increases, our variable cost per unit is constant. Then what we need to do, multiply the variable cost per unit by the level of activities to help us ascertain the total variable cost for that level of activities. Now, I will share the screen where we'll just do one calculation so that we can understand these steps that we just mentioned. Just give me a few minutes. Let me share the screen. Okay, where is this? Okay, good. I believe you can see the new one I just shared. If you can see, just use a thumb up so that I can know that we can see it. Okay, that is fine. That is fine. Okay, that is very good. All right, here is a simple example. Let me see if I can just, okay, I'm coming, please. All right. Now, here is an example where we can test our understanding on how the high and low method work. I want all of us to be on the same page to help us and get familiar to the approach. Now, a company has recorded the following costs in the past 6 months. You know, the company have this following record for the past 6 months. You know, they have from January to June, and then the level of each production, the level of each production in January, the level of activities is 5,800 with the total cost of 40,300. February, they have 7,700 units. The total cost of 47,100. Okay. In May, they have 8,200 units with the total cost of 48,700, while in April they have 6,100 units with total cost of 40,600. In May, they have 6,500 units with the associated cost of 44,500. In June, they produce 7,500 units with the associated cost of 47,100. Now, the first thing that will come to our mind is from January to June, which one among them has the highest level of activities? And then which one among them have the lower level of activities? Now, if you look at it very well, we can see that March have the higher level of activities, while January also have the lower level of activities. You know, those are the two things that we are going to concentrate more here because we are using a formula, we are using a method known as high and low method. You know, the higher level of activities and then the lower level of activities. Now, what did they require us to do? Now, they require us to calculate the variable cost per unit, calculate the total fixed cost, and then determine the cost function, determine the cost function. You know, I make mention that the first steps that we need to know is how can we determine the higher level and then the lower level. Now, solution. Now, high and then low. Okay, let me shift this one down. So I'm coming, let me just shift this one down. I want us to be on the same page. Okay, then the units and then the total costs. The total costs. Okay, units. This one. Units. Okay. Now, what is our total? What is our I unit? Our I unit is in March. Then is 8,200 units. While the associated cost of it is 48,700. Okay. Okay. Is 48,700. Now the lower level of activities is in January, which is 5,800. And then the associated cost to it is 40,300. Now we are, based on the first step, now we're able to know the high and the low. Then we need to determine their differences. How are we going to do that? Is to minus the high level of activities from the lower level of activities. Like I said, based on the steps, that one, it will help us to ascertain our variable costs. Now, step one. Okay, now let's move on to step two. Now, step two, we want to calculate the variable costs. Variable costs. Now, how do we calculate our variable costs? Now, you can see the formula. You can see the formula to calculate it. You say the cost of the higher level of activities. Now, we have already know the cost of the higher level. We have already know the cost of the lower level. Then we know the unit of the high and low unit as well. Then we have to minus them one after the other. So how do we do this? We say 8,000, 5,800. Now it's going to give us the differences between the high and then the low. Then we'll say the cost associated to the high level minus the cost associated to the lower level. Now it's going to give us 8,400. Now we'll now come to this because we want to determine the variable costs. We'll say 8,400. I'm coming, please. Let's just 8,400. Okay. Divided by 2,000. 2,400. Now we say 8,000 divided by this. Now you can see now this is our variable costs. Variable costs per unit. You know, using the formula based on the step two. You know, the formula say we look for the differences between the associated cost of the high and then the low, where we're able to get 8,400. And then the differences between the level of activities, the high and the low, which is which give us 2,400. Then we will now divide the differences between the costs and then the differences between the level of activities to ascertain the variable costs per unit. Our variable cost per unit here is 3 naira 50 kobo. Now let's move to the third step. Now the third step down is to ascertain our fixed cost. Okay, step 3. Now fixed cost. This cost Q is in. Okay. Now, the second step said we should calculate fixed costs by substituting the substitution using either the low or the high level of activities. You know, in this approach now, we can use either of the low level of activities with the associated costs or the high level of activities with the associated costs to determine our fixed cost. We are going to arrive at the same answer. I said the formula that we need to know is A is equal to Y minus B multiplied by X. You know, I explained this formula earlier that A stands for fixed cost, while Y stand for our total costs, while B stand for the variable cost per unit, and then X stand for level of activities. Now we have ascertained our variable cost per unit because that is the major thing that we need to know before we can determine the fixed cost. Our variable cost per unit here, which is B, is equal to 3 naira 50 kobo. 3 naira 50 kobo. Then our Y, we say our Y is associated cost. Then I'm going to use the two levels so that we can understand it, and then we are going to see how it's going to give us the same answer. Now, firstly, we are going to use the I level of activities with the associated costs. Now, the associated cost of the higher level of activities is the 48,700. Now, our level of activities, which is X, is equal to 8,000. Please mute your mic, please. All right, thank you. Now our X is 8,200 units. Now what we are looking for A, which is our fixed cost. How are we going to do it? Now we say Y is equal to 48. Know that our 48,700 is our total cost. No, we are following the formula. A is equal to Y minus BX. Y is equal to X minus BX. Now our Y is 48,700 minus, we have to put it in brackets. What is B? Our B is our variable cost per unit, which is 3 naira 50 kobo. Then what is our level of activities, which is X? We'll now multiply our level of activities with the variable cost per unit. Our level of activities now is our level of activities now is 8,200. Now, this is how we are going to structure it into the formula. Then we need to calculate it one after the other. We'll now say 48,700 Now, we want to determine the variable cost multiplied by our level of activities. That is 3.5 multiplied by 8,200 is going to give us 28,000. Let me clean this. It's going to give us 28,700. It means the variable cost to produce 8,200 units in this product is 28,700. Now, remember that they have already given us our total costs. And what we are looking for now is our fixed cost. Now, how do we determine the fixed cost? You know, our Y stand for our fixed cost. We will now say 48,700, which is our total fixed cost, minus 28,700. Now, it means our total fixed cost in this aspect is going to give us 20,000. I believe we are on the same page. Our total fixed cost in producing 8,200 units of level of activities with the total cost of 48,700. Our total fixed cost is going to be 20,000. Now, let's now test if what we calculate is going to give us our total costs associated with the 8,200 units. Now we'll say 20,000 plus 28,700. Now, as you can see now, we're able to determine our fixed costs, our total cost after we have segregated. You know, the purpose of this high and low method is just to split the total costs, to split them so that we'll be able to know which one belongs to the variable cost and then which one belongs to the fixed cost. In this case, if the company decided to increase the level of activities now, our total fixed cost is still going to remain constant, while the cost of the variable costs in total will increase. But the variable cost per unit is going to remain constant. We need to remember that one very well. You know, we say if, in example, if maybe they decide to increase it to 9,000, the only thing that is going to change is we now say, okay, our level of activities are increased to 9,000. Since we have already ascertained our variable cost per unit, what are we going to do? The variable cost per unit multiplied by the 9,000 to get our total variable costs. Now, let's now use the lower level of activities to know if we are still going to get the same 20,000 for the fixed costs. You know, let's now use the lower level of activities now. Lower level. Now our lower level of activities is 8,000. Is 5,800, while the total cost associated to it is 40,300. Now, very simple, since we have already know the format that we are using, we'll now say the total cost. Now the total cost is 40,300. Okay, that is the total cost. Now, our variable cost per unit is 3 naira 50 kobo. Now we multiply it by the lower level of activities, which is 5,000 800. Now you can see it's now that our total variable costs, okay, our total variable cost for the lower level of activities is 20,300. While the total costs associated to the level of activities is 40,300. Now, let's now test if we are still going to get this the same fixed cost that we get while we are using the higher level. Now we'll just say the 48,300 minus 20,300, which is what the total variable cost. Then you see now we arrive at the same thing. In the exam, you can decide to use anyone. You can decide to use lower, and then you can decide to use higher. It's going to give us the same thing. Now, the requirement number 3 is said we should determine the cost function. Now, after we have determined the variable costs per unit, we have determined the variable cost in total, and then we have also determined the fixed cost as well. Now, how can you construct the total cost function? Now, construct the total costs function, because this is what we need whenever we want to ascertain our total costs of a production. Once we're able to determine the variable cost and then the fixed cost. Now, the total costs. Now, we'll now say, I'm coming. We'll now say total costs is equal to our fixed cost is 20,000 minus, plus, because it's cost function that we're working on, 3.5, which is our variable cost per unit. Now multiply by X. Now remember our X stand for, let me put it in capital. Our X stand for the level of activities. Now, this is our cost function. In this cost function now, whenever our level of activities increases, the only thing that will be affected is the variable cost in total, because it will be increases, but the total cost that we have determined is still going to remain constant unless there is a step fixed cost. We are still going to talk about that one. I just want us to understand these very well. Okay, this was supposed to be total costs. Okay, now this is the cost function. If the organization decided to increase the level of activities to 10,000 now, example, the only thing that we are going to make use of is just to know the variable cost. When I say the variable cost per unit, which is 3.5, multiply by the level of activities that increases from 8,200 to 10,000. Now it gives us 35. It gives us 35,000. You can see 35,000. Then how can we determine the total cost? Very simple. Since we have already know our fixed cost, we will now say our fixed cost is 20,000. Okay, let me use same format. Same format. Okay, now we'll just say the total costs plus the total variable costs. Here now our total cost now is going to be 50,000 because our level of activities increases from 8,200 to 10,000. The fixed cost still remain constant here. The only thing that is affected is the variable cost in total. The variable cost in unit still remain constant as well. Our level of activities increases, we multiply with our variable cost per unit. So if in the exam they give us something related to this and they ask us to determine the variable cost per unit, then determine the fixed cost using high and low method, the first thing that will come to your mind is which one is among this level of activities is high, which one is low. You have to separate them. Just know the key steps on how to work on these things. Understand the key steps. It will help us a lot because once we are able to understand the key step by identifying the low and the high, we won't be get the variable cost per unit correctly. And then once we make a mistake in determining the variable cost per unit, the remaining workings is not going to be in line. That is why we need to pay attention whenever we are dealing with this kind of scenario. Know your high and then know your low costs. That is the number one thing. Then you know the differences between those units of high and low, and then between the cost associated of high and low, because that is what we are going to use to arrive at our total cost, our variable cost per unit. And then the next step is once you're able to get the variable cost per unit, the next step is for you to determine your fixed costs. Just understand the formula. The formula for splitting cost, we say is Y is equal to A plus B times X. But if we are to determine our fixed cost, we will not say A minus is equal to the Y, which is our total cost, minus, we are not going to use plus in this time because we are not calculating the total cost, we are only calculating the fixed cost. We will say A minus Y, A is equal to Y minus B multiplied by X. Understand what the B stand for, understand what the X stand for. Once you are able to know this cost function, you are good to go whenever you see this kind of a scenario in the exam hall. Based on the previous exam related to high and low method, related to cost, segregation, and estimate, they usually test the high and low and then the linear regression together. The once you are able to ascertain the high and low level of activities, it might be a little bit challenges when we are dealing with linear regression. That is what we are going to discuss in our next class. And once you're able to come up with your fixed cost, the next thing is to come up with your cost function, which you can be using as the period goes in order for an organization to determine the total cost of the level of production. I believe that we're able to get this explanation very well. Let me share the where is the second one? Okay. Okay, good. Good. Now we have calculate this one, this example, and then we are also walk through it by letting us know the importance of how the steps work in. Now, the next one, our class will be ending in the next 15 minutes. So we need to be fast, and then so that we can cover the little one. Now, in this particular one, where there is a change in fixed costs, the step is still going to be the same thing, but the differences here that we need to know is by making an adjustment whenever we are having an addition to our fixed costs. The first one we say we are going to calculate what is it called? We determine our high and low level of activities, then we calculate the variable cost, then we calculate the fixed cost, and then we come up with the cost function. Now, in this kind of scenario where an organization determined to increase their fixed costs when the level of activities is exceed or equal to a particular projection. Let me put it that way. A particular projection. How can we deal with it? Now, in this one, I will just explain. I'm coming. Let me see. I will just explain. Now, you can see in this one now, the company has identified that the total fixed costs increased by 50,000 when the level of activities equal or exceed 19,000 units. Remember, the variable cost per unit is constant over the range of the level of activities. Now, the company has recorded the following costs at 2 activities level. Now, in this ones now, they decide to give us the high and low level of activities directly. It's not that maybe we are going to be the one to be coming up with our, we'll be the one to be coming up with, what is it called? We'll be coming up with which one is high, then which one is low. Now, which give me a few minutes. Now, let's see now. Okay, I'm coming up. As we have 5 more minutes for this. 5 more minutes for this. Okay, let me see if, all right, that's fine. Now, I'm going to share it in the group so that we can all go through it. Now, the requirement of this one is adjust the lower level of costs for the steps change in the fixed cost. Then we calculate the variable cost per unit. Then we are going to calculate the fixed cost above and below the 19,000 units of product. Now, in this one, if there is a change in the fixed cost, the first one that we prepare, there is no change in the fixed cost. Despite the fact that the level of activities increases, our fixed cost still remains constant. But in this very one is if there is a change in our level of activities, and then the change now affected the fixed cost, for us to increase the fixed cost with a certain amount. Now, how do we calculate it? I just decided to come with the workings direct and then explain it to us how it's going to be, remember, number one steps is for us to identify the low and the high, and then identify the cost associated to them. That is the number one thing that we need to know. Once you're able to identify those things, the remaining steps will be easier. Now, on this requirement, now they say we should adjust the lower level costs for the step change in the fixed costs. Now, they say the fixed cost is going to be increased by the 15,000. Then we have not determined the fixed cost yet. They only give us the total costs. How can we adjust it? And how can we, after adjusting it, how can we come up with the total fixed costs? Now, we want to adjust it now because that is the number one requirement that we say we should ask. Adjust this fixed cost. Adjust the step in the fixed cost. Now, how do we do this if we are to adjust it? They say if the level of activities is equal or exceed 19,000 units, our fixed cost is going to increase by 15,000. Now you can see now, once our level of activities is equal to 19,000 or more than 19,000, our fixed cost will be increases by, our fixed cost will be increases by 15,000. Now you can see here, our fixed cost will be increases by 15,000. Now we need to adjust it based on the lower level of activities. Now, the lower level of activities before the unit, they give us 17 units. And then with the associated cost of 165,000. 165,000. Then now we need to adjust it based on the lower level of activities. Now what we are going to do is we are going to say the total cost associated with the level of activities, which is 160,000, plus the increase in total fixed cost if our level of activities increases or equal to 19,000. If we add the two together, it's going to give us 180,000. It means once our level of activities increases to 19,000 units of level of activities, the total cost is going to be 180,000. That is the number one requirement that they ask us to do. You need to understand how all these things work. That is the number one. Then we have adjusted the lower level of activities now based on the change in the level of based on the change in the fixed costs, because our level of activities increases. Then the organization decided to step the fixed cost with 15,000 naira. Now we're able to determine the fixed cost now, the total cost that we are going to get if the level of activities increases to 19,000 units. Now the second one say we should calculate the variable cost per unit. Okay, how are we going to calculate the variable cost per unit? I believe we all know, based on the first example that we just finished, that we use the high and low level of activities, then we get the differences. And then we look at the level, the cost associated to the two, we look at the differences as well. Now, the level of activities based on what they give us is 22,000 units with the associated cost of 195 for the high level of activities, while the lower level of activities is 17,000. Then we look at the differences. So once we look at the differences, you're able to come up with the cost per unit. We're able to come up with the cost per unit based on the using the steps that we explained earlier. I believe we are on the same page. All this approach is just to help us if there is a changes in our fixed cost. How can we determine it? How can we calculate it that we are not going to confuse in case we see this kind of related aspects in the exam? Then the next thing that we are going to do is they say calculate the fixed cost above and below the 19,000 units. How are we going to do that? The first one, we want to calculate the total cost if our level of activities above 19,000. Now, in this aspect, now we are only going to focus using the high level of activities that they give us in the question. Our high level of activities in this one is 22,000 units with the associated cost of 190,000. Remember, we have already come up with our cost per unit, variable cost per unit, which is 3 naira. How are we going to do the same thing that we used in the previous one? Fixed cost is equal to total cost minus variable cost multiplied by the units. Simple. You just say the 195,000, which is the total cost for the high level of activities, minus 3 naira, which is our variable cost per unit, multiplied by the level of activities, which is 22,000. It's going to give us 128,000 naira. Now, it means our total cost, if our level of activities increases to 19,000 units, is going to be 129,000 if the level of activities increases. What if our level of activities did not increases? We still maintain the 17,000. The 17,000 units. In this aspect, we are not going to stress ourselves. We just say the total cost that we arrive with is 129,000 minus the increase in fixed cost that we are asked to add initially, which is 15,000. That we are asked to add initially, which is 15,000. Okay, which is 15,000. We will say, okay, let me simplify this. Let me simplify this so help us be on the same page. Just give me a minute. Let me simplify it so that we can understand what this is talking about. Let me share another screen. Let me share another screen now. Okay, good. Let me share another screen now. Okay, good. All right. I believe we can all see this. Let me share another screen and now let me now explain so that we can get this clearly and straightforward. Okay, and straightforward. I'm coming. All right. Now, they say the company decided to increase the fees costs if the level of activities is equal or exceed 19,000. Now, we have calculated the fees cost if the level of activities exceed the 19,000. Now, what if the level of activities did not exceed the 19,000? What are we going to do? Very simple. What we are going to do, we will just say the 129,000 for our fees cost if the level of activities increases minus the budgeted fees cost that the organization have set if the level of activities increases to 19,000. Now, which is 15,000 naira as been budgeted by the company. What we are going to do, we just say the total cost if the level of activities increases to 19,000 minus the 15,000 that the organization decided to put if the level of activities increases. Now, what we are going to get now, if the level of activity did not later increases to 19,000, that will still maintain what the organization give us, which is the 22,000 of higher and then the 70,000 of lower. We just minus that amount that the organization decided to add for us to get the below total fees cost if the level of activities did not exceeded the 19,000. The purpose of this is just to know, because in the question, they can just give us that they will give us the total level of activity and then they give us the associated cost. But from the narration, the examiner can just decided to come up with another scenario, which we need to pay much attention to. We need to pay the attention to. They can just say the organization decided to increase the fees cost with certain amount of value. Let's just start with 15,000 when the level of activities equal or exceed 19,000. If we did not pay attention to that details, details, we just continue by using the table that the organization give us to determine our high and low method, and then we will just determine to come up with our variable cost, and then we determine to come up with the fixed costs. We are not going to get the accurate answer. That is the reason why we need to read the question very well and look at the requirements. What did they ask us to do? In the exam hall, the first thing you look at is what is the requirement? What is he asking us to do? What did they ask us to do? Once we're able to know what the requirement is all about, you can now go back to the question itself, read it one after the other. As you are reading it, try to be jotting down what the question is all about. In the first one, they only ask us to calculate the fees cost and then to calculate the variable costs. They did not tell us that if the level of activities exceeded a particular unit, we are going to increase our fees cost. No, they did not tell us. But in this case now, they tell us that if our level of activities exceeded a particular unit, what is going to be our fees cost? We cannot just get the fees cost without ascertaining the variable cost per unit. If we just go ahead and use the high and low method that they give us without consider maybe the examiner said the fixed cost is going to increase with the certain percentage or certain amount, what we are going to calculate is not going to give us the actual variable cost, because we need to utilize that amount they give us, they give us in the question, that the fixed cost is going to increase by, and add it to our lower level of activities associated costs. Then we will now use it to determine our variable cost. Unlike the first one that we just determine it, because they did not give us any associated costs. So if the fixed cost is above the level of activities, our cost function will now be fixed costs, fixed cost, plus the fixed cost, total cost plus is equal to the fixed cost plus level variable cost per unit multiplied by the level of activities. Now we'll now say our cost function will now be total costs is equal to 129,000. If this one is if the level of activities is above the 19,000, if it is above the 19,000, if it's above what they give us in the equation, if based on the level, the seed unit that was given in the equation, plus the variable cost that we have determined, which is 3 naira, then we will now multiply it by the level of activities which stand with X. Now, this is another cost function. This first cost function is when the level of activities is below what they give us. Okay, if is below what they give us, why the second one is when it's above it, because the reason why we're having the differences is we have had a change in our fixed costs. Our fixed cost has increases by 15,000. That is the reason why we are getting 129,000. But if our fixed cost did not increases, we are going to get 114,000 based on what I calculated here earlier for us. Because what is the amount that our fixed cost is increased with is 15,000 based on what they give us in the equation. We just need to understand this. We need to understand this. All these things will now help an organization to forecast on how to determine the total costs. That is the reason why we are coming up with this cost function. Using high and low method, getting the variable cost, getting the fixed cost. What is the purpose? The purpose is to come up with the cost function to help an organization analyze and forecast their costs. With that is why we are preparing all these things. That is why we are using the high and low method, so that at the end of all these things, we will be able to come up with a very significant cost reduction for the organization. Now, remember the key things here before we end our class. In high and low method, they will give us different level of activities with their associated costs. They will give us the level of activities with the associated cost. You see, all these steps we need to put it in our head whenever we are solving any related what is it called questions. I'm still going to send another question to group so that we can test it when I release the our what is it called our paper for today. So I'm going to add some exercise to it. You know, the purpose of adding all this exercise is for us to just go through it and then we practice it. It's not by just attending the class. Attend the class and then based on your schedule on how you plan to be reading, make sure that at least you're able to solve one question to know how all this thing works. High and low method. Why high and low method? We use high and low methods to separate our costs when we are given a missed cost. Missed cost. What is missed cost? Missed cost comprises of variable costs and then the fixed costs. How can we separate it? As a management accountant, they just decide to give you a particular cost and they tell you that this cost comprises of both fees or variable cost, or they just tell that okay, oh, this cost is mixed costs. How can you separate it? You know, we usually use the best method we use is high and low method. Okay, now high and low method, you know what is your level of activities, and then what is the associated costs, which is the total costs. Then know the high level of activities and the know the lower level of activities. Then you make the comparison. You minus it. Our level of activities, the high one is 2,000, the lower one is 1,005. You minus it. Then the differences is what you are going to use. The same thing you are going to do to your associated costs. The associated cost is 2,000 for the high, the associated cost for the lower level is 1,005. Then you get the differences. Once you're able to get the differences between the high level of activities, the cost, and then the high level of activities, the what is it called? The unit production will now help us to know how much do we spend in costs per production of each of these units. And that is the purpose. Once you're able to get the variable cost per unit, you have done everything, because the remaining step is very easy. Just use the formula by determining your fixed costs. Know the fixed cost, then just minus the total cost from the variable cost in total. How do you ascertain the variable cost in total? Variable cost per unit multiply by the level of activity. Simple. Then you arrive at your fixed costs. You know, when you're able to get this thing, if the mark allocated to the high and low method in the exam is 10, within 10 minutes, you are getting your 10 marks and you are good to go. You know, then you look at the other aspects. You know, in our next class, we are going to discuss on how linear regression, how can we use linear regression to split costs. You know, those are the key key functions that we use in splitting costs. Now we have talked about the high and low method. Our next class now we are going to determine on how to use linear regression to determine the cost function. And I want to believe that we able to get one or two things from today's class. And then the key things here is how high and low method is work. How can we use it to split our costs. How do we use the high and low method to split our costs? Using the cost function formula. We say cost function formula is y is equal to a plus b multiplied by x, and then we able to tell us what the y stand for, a stand for, b stand for, and x stand for. And then we also said that we have a different cost function equation for for cost to determine our cost functions, to split our costs. Today we're able to know how to use high and low cost function analysis. And then in the next class, we are going to discuss about the linear regression. We're able to discuss about the linear regression as well. And then how can we use linear regression to split our costs? And then the comparison, what they are comparison with high and low method. Those are the things that we are going to discuss on Wednesday. And I believe that we have get one or two things, and then I will open the floor for any questions within 2 minutes so that we can end our class today. If you have any question related to this, you have 2 minutes to do that. Just unmute your mic and then ask the question. Maybe when we are preparing, when we are preparing the example, you get confused in the steps that we are using. Or you have any other question that you can ask in related to this or outside this, the floor is open. You have just 2 minutes to do that. And if no one has a question, we can then come to the end of today's class. I'm still waiting for anyone to have question. If case you don't have, then we can end the space so that every one of us can go and rest. But please and please and please, whenever topic that we treated, I want us to go back to it once we drop the materials in the group.
Sorry, good evening, sir.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Jeremiah.
All right, thank you, sir. My question is just straight. I guess I don't know. Will this be shared like back on the group, like maybe the audio record or video record, including that of yesterday?
Okay, yes, it should be shared. Sorry that that we have not even shared the yesterday one. It's going to be shared. By tomorrow morning, we are going to share it with we'll share the recording aspect, and then we're going to share the materials as well, so that we can go through it.
All right, thank you, sir. I just asked because I did a lot of writing down and everything, so I'll just use that again to brush myself up. Thank you, sir.
All right, that is very fine. That is very fine. I love that. That is very fine. And then I noticed from the group, it's only one person. Let me check. It's only one person that really indicates that he understands what we treated in our last classroom. Mr. Abdullahi Aliyu. I don't know if you are on the space. He's the only one that's we're able to attend to our last 2 exercises that we discuss about. All this is just to test our ability, just to say what we have learned, because in foundation level now, it's not going to be only on solving alone. No, it's two parts. We are going to have the section A and section B. In section A is where they are going to test our reading level. In section B, they will still test the reading level where they will just ask you, determine the divide is what are the objective or what are the function of this. But in part A, they will just tell you, okay, which particular cause do we use in determining so thing? Then they can give you variable cause, fixed cause, step cause. The only thing is how do you assess yourself using all these things? That is the reason why I'm trying to put all those exercises to test our ability. Let's try to be solving and solve other questions as well. I'll be sharing some questions to us, so that we can use that one to keep on testing ourselves. And I believe God will help us and we'll all achieve our objective. So good night to everyone. Since we do not have question, and thank you for joining our today's class. And God bless you all. Good night.